Look at a map of modern Europe. The borders are clean, continuous, and clearly defined. But if you rewind the clock back to the 11th century, those neat lines shatter into a chaotic, overlapping mess of thousands of tiny, decentralized feudal lordships. So how did we get from that fractured map to the rigid, organized nations we know today? We often imagine that the modern state was sketched out on a chalkboard by Enlightenment philosophers, visionaries who sat down and rationally designed governments to maximize peace and societal welfare. But the historical record reveals a much harsher reality. The mechanics of modern government, things like structured taxes, internal police forces, and hard administrative borders, were forged out of sheer desperation. They were born from a violent, constant need for territorial survival. To understand how this happened, we have to look through the combined theoretical lens of two prominent historians, Otto Hintze and Charles Tilly. Together, their work reveals how geopolitical pressure and resource extraction dictated the design of the nations we live in today. The administrative tools we now think of as the hallmarks of a civilized society were, at their origin, engineered exclusively to run a war machine. Let's start with Otto Hintze. His macro theory poses a fascinating idea. The internal shape of a government is dictated almost entirely by the external military threats it faces. Post-Roman Europe was a vulnerable, decentralized feudal system without standing armies or centralized taxes. As populations grew, territories physically collided. Hintze described these early nations pushing and pressing against neighbors, creating a relentless geopolitical pressure cooker. To survive this constant threat of annihilation, rulers had to react. The only way to avoid being swallowed by a neighboring power was to scale up and centralize their military organizations. According to Hintze, the very skeleton of the modern state was molded directly by this external military competition. Rulers were left with a stark choice: centralize your power or perish. If Hintze explains the why of centralization, Charles Tilly explains the how. To survive Hintze's pressure cooker, rulers faced an enormous practical problem. How do you actually afford the astronomical costs of fighting continuous wars? Tilly boiled this down to two primary variables driving state formation: the extraction of capital, meaning money and wealth, and the application of coercion, meaning brute force and the mobilization of armies. To feed the war machine, monarchs aggressively squeezed capital and coercion from populations. Government structures evolved based purely on available resources. Manpower-heavy states developed into coercive Prussian empires, while trade-rich regions formed capital-heavy Dutch federations. Despite having radically different political systems, these varied European governments were ultimately attempting to solve the exact same problem: finding a mechanical way to fund wars and survive. When we bring Hintze's external pressures and Tilly's internal extraction models together, a chilling consensus emerges. The core identity of the modern state is inextricably linked to the practice of organized violence. Charles Tilly summarized this reality with a single foundational thesis: war made the state, and the state made war. Functions we now call public services, like national treasuries, complex administrative bureaucracies, even food supply controls, began as the logistical tools required to squeeze resources from a population for the next battle. Our modern government institutions represent the highly evolved bureaucratic scar tissue of centuries of warfare. Beneath the intricate machinery of modern civilization lies the unyielding foundation of an ancient military engine.